That day in the courtroom was nothing like anyone had seen. Nana, a quiet 7-year-old girl, stood in front of the judge, trembling. Her mother sat behind her, pale, weak, and silent. Her father's hands shook on his knees, and everyone in that courtroom waited to hear the words that would change everything. "Tell us, my dear," the judge said softly. "Do you know who hurt your neighbor?" The little girl swallowed hard, turned slowly, and pointed. That single finger froze the entire courtroom, because who she pointed at was the last person anyone expected, and the very reason left everyone's mouth wide open in shock. It all began 3 months earlier. The sun had barely risen when the quiet neighborhood of Oba Street was torn apart by screams. High-pitched, terrified screams coming from Uncle Benson's compound. Uncle Benson was the man everyone respected, trusted, and liked. He was polite, successful, and generous with neighbors. He always smiled, always greeted, and was known for helping people when they were in need. That faithful day, the shouting began in the morning. People rushed out of their houses hastily, grabbing their phones, calling out to each other. "Who's shouting?" someone asked. "It came from Benson's house," another answered, breathless. By the time the police arrived, the crowd was already gathered at the gate. The sirens wailed briefly and stopped. 2 officers pushed through the onlookers, and minutes later, one of them came out shaking his head. "Dead," he announced. "He's dead." Gasps filled the air. According to the officers, Uncle Benson was found lying in his kitchen, stabbed once in the chest, the knife still stuck there, blood pooling beneath his body. The air grew tense, heavy, and still. Among the worried neighbors that morning were Jide and Fiona, a quiet couple who lived 2 houses away. They were the type that kept to themselves, polite but private. Fiona stood at the corner of the street, clutching her little daughter, Nana, to her chest. The child's wide eyes darted toward the commotion, frightened. "Don't look, my baby," Fiona whispered, gently turning her away. But Nana couldn't help peeking again, her small fingers gripping her mother's dress tightly. Jide walked up to one of the men in the crowd. "What happened?" he asked. "They said it was a thief that killed him," the man replied grimly. "Just one stab. Only God will judge this world." Jide exhaled slowly, his heart heavy. "God have mercy," he whispered. By noon, rumors had already begun spreading. Some said Benson's business partners set him up. Some claimed it was a burglary gone wrong. Others whispered that maybe it was a domestic fight. But the truth was still unknown. 2 days later, detectives combed the area again. They examined Benson's fence, the bushes, and every small corner of his yard. Then, late that evening, news spread that they had found something. A torn piece of cloth, stained with blood, hidden near the back fence. At first, nobody thought much of it, until they matched the fabric and realized it belonged to a man's shirt. Not just any shirt. The same patterned shirt that Jide, Fiona's husband, was known to wear. Neighbors who once waved at Jide every morning suddenly began whispering when he passed. The whispers grew into gossip. The gossip turned into suspicion. And within days, the police returned to the street, this time for a very different reason. The knock came in the evening. It was sharp, loud, and heavy. 3 hard bangs on the front door that startled everyone inside. Fiona was in the kitchen when she heard it. Her heart skipped. She wiped her hands on a towel and hurried out. "Who's that?" she called out. But before Jide could answer, the knocking came again, louder this time. He frowned and walked to the door. "Hold on, I'm coming." When he opened it, 2 police officers stood there, stern-faced. One of them held a file in his hand. "Mr. Jide Okafor?" "Yes, that's me. What's the problem?" "You're under arrest for the murder of Benson Nayo." Fiona froze. The officers stepped forward quickly. "You have to cooperate with us, sir." "Arrest?" Jide repeated, stunned. "Murder?" "Officer, There must be a mistake. But the taller officer was already pulling out a pair of handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court. Fiona ran forward, her voice shaking. Arrest? No, officers. Please, my husband didn't do it. You're arresting the wrong person. As she said those words, her voice cracked. Her cries filled the small sitting room, but the officers didn't flinch. They clasped Jide's wrists together tightly with the cuffs. Please, let me at least get my shoes, Jide begged. You'll have time for that later, one officer muttered, pushing him gently toward the door. Fiona followed them out. Her legs became weak, her tears spilling uncontrollably. Please, officer, listen to me. He's innocent. I swear he's innocent. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The street was already alive with whispers. Neighbors peeked from their windows and gates, murmuring. Some pitied her. Others just folded their arms, shaking their heads. No one spoke to her directly. She stood at the edge of the street, watching as her husband was led into the police van, its blue lights flashing silently. Jide, she cried. Oh Lord, please. Help me. But all he could do was look back through the window, his face blank, his eyes full of disbelief. When the van drove off, Fiona fell to her knees on the wet pavement, hugging her daughter tightly and sobbing until her voice broke. That night, the silence in their home was deafening. The next morning, Fiona forced herself to the police station. The smell of sweat, smoke, and metal filled the air. Officers walked past her with cold faces. Minutes later, she was finally allowed to see Jide. Her heart nearly stopped. Jide sat on a concrete bench behind iron bars, his hands trembling slightly. His shirt was rumpled, his eyes red and swollen. He looked up as she approached. Fiona? His voice cracked. Tell me this isn't real. Her lips quivered. I'm trying, Jide. I'm trying. She reached for his hands through the bars. He squeezed them weakly. They said they found my shirt at Benson's house. I don't understand it. I didn't go there. I didn't even see him that day. Tears filled her eyes. I know. I know you didn't. And I will stand to see you free for a moment. They just stared at each other. Both broken, both afraid. Fiona bit her lip hard, trying to hold back tears. Please, don't lose hope. We'll find a way. We'll prove your innocence. You have to be strong for me and our daughter. He nodded slowly, but his eyes looked distant, the eyes of a tired, defeated man, and he managed a faint smile. Fiona turned to leave, slow and silent. Her face looked calm, but her eyes told a different story, one that couldn't be told. Not yet. Days turned into weeks. The house that once carried laughter now echoed with silence. The walls felt cold. The nights stretched endlessly. Fiona barely spoke to anyone. She moved like a ghost through her own home, cooking, cleaning, and waiting for visiting hours to see her husband. Every night after putting Nana to bed, she would sit by the window, staring out into the dark street, tears quietly rolling down her face. Sometimes she whispered his name like a prayer. Jide, please hold on. But her voice always broke halfway. She could hardly eat. She could hardly breathe. The thought of losing her husband tore her apart. She tried to keep it together for their daughter, but every time Nana looked at her with those innocent eyes, Fiona's chest ached. One faithful morning, Nana couldn't hold back the feeling anymore. Mummy, the little girl asked softly, when will Daddy come home? Fiona froze for a moment, staring at her daughter's tiny fingers tugging her cloth. Her throat tightened. Soon, baby, she managed to say with a shaky smile. Daddy will come home soon. But her heart screamed a different truth. That fear, the fear of losing him, never left her. It followed her everywhere. Every sound of footsteps outside made her jump. Every knock on the door made her tremble. At night, she would sit on the edge of her bed, clutching her hands together and whispering prayers she barely remembered how to say. Sometimes she looked at the mirror and didn't recognize herself anymore. Her face pale, her eyes sunken, her spirit now fading under the weight of guilt and fear. Each day passed like a punishment, and the very silence she was trying to keep was slowly destroying her from the inside. Finally, the day of the court trial arrived, and it felt like a storm had gathered over their lives. The courthouse was filled to the brim, reporters with cameras, neighbors with curious eyes, and strangers who had come to see how the story of the quiet man who killed his neighbor would end. Fiona sat quietly at the back, clutching Nana's small hand tightly. Her heart raced so fast it felt like her ribs might crack. Jide sat in the defendant's chair, his head bowed. He looked thinner now, weaker, like a man who had aged 10 years in just a few weeks. The prosecutor stood tall, adjusting his black suit before addressing the judge. His voice echoed easily across the silent courtroom. "My lord, this is a clear case of premeditated murder. The accused, Mr. Jide Okafor, was known to have quarreled with the deceased, Benson Nayo, over a piece of land just 2 weeks before the killing. The evidence is overwhelming. A piece of his shirt stained with the victim's blood was found near the crime scene." He lifted a sealed plastic bag from the evidence table. Inside it, the torn cloth sat, wrinkled and dark with dried blood. Murmurs filled the court. Fiona's hands shook as she watched the cloth being passed around. Her chest felt tight. She wanted to scream, but her lips refused to move. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could barely hear the rest of the prosecutor's words. When the defense lawyer stood, Fiona held her breath. He tried to fight back with calm reasoning. "Your lordship, the accused has no criminal record, no history of violence. The evidence is circumstantial. There were no witnesses to the alleged fight, and no direct proof that Mr. Jide was even at the scene of the crime." The judge nodded slowly. "So you claim the evidence presented does not conclusively tie the accused to the murder?" "Yes, my lord," the defense replied. "There is more to this case than meets the eye." Fiona swallowed hard. She could feel sweat on her palms. Her mind raced. More to this case. If only they knew how much more. The lawyer continued. "If there are no new witnesses, we ask that—" He didn't finish his sentence when Fiona suddenly raised her hand. This moment she looked at her husband. Jide turned his head slightly. Their eyes met for the first time in days. His expression was broken and pleading. Something inside Fiona snapped. Her heart pounded so hard as she stood shakily to her feet. "I have something to say," she whispered. The courtroom erupted with murmurs. The judge tapped his gavel sharply. "Order. Let the woman speak." Fiona took a deep breath and began to walk slowly toward the front. Her hands trembled as she clutched her dress. Her voice shook. "My lord, But before she could finish that sentence, a small voice interrupted her. "Your lordship," the voice said softly. Everyone turned. Standing at the far end of the room was Nana, the little girl no one had paid attention to since the trial began. The entire courtroom went still. The judge blinked in surprise. "Who's speaking?" Nana raised her tiny hand. "It's me, my lord. I want to say something." At that moment, Fiona froze. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The air around her grew heavy. Even Jide shifted uneasily in his seat, panic rising as he wondered what his little girl was about to say. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Come closer, my dear." The child stepped forward timidly, her small shoes clicking softly on the tiled floor. "What do you want to say?" the judge asked kindly. Nana's voice trembled as she spoke again. "My daddy didn't kill Uncle Ben. I know who did it." The entire courtroom gasped. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure about what you're saying?" Nana nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, my lord. I witnessed it." The murmuring in the courtroom turned into stunned silence. Reporters lifted their cameras. The prosecutor frowned. The judge tapped his pen slowly on the desk. "All right then. This court will hear you, child. Tell us what you know." For a moment, the little girl said nothing. Her eyes darted nervously between her father, frozen in his seat, and her mother, standing at the witness stand. Then, with trembling fingers, she turned slowly. Her lips parted as she raised her small hand. Everyone watched, hearts pounding, breath held, and then she pointed, not to her father, not to anyone else, but straight at her mother, at Fiona. And at that moment, a collective gasp filled the courtroom. A reporter's pen dropped to the floor. The judge's eyes widened behind his glasses. Even Jide's jaw fell open as he turned sharply to look at his wife. Fiona's face went pale. The entire room seemed to freeze in time, until one woman whispered faintly from the gallery, "Jesus Christ!" But no one else could speak, because at that moment, every single person knew the truth that was about to come out was something none of them were ready for. It all started a few weeks before Benson's death. In the neighborhood, Uncle Benson was the kind of man everyone trusted. He was polite, always smiling, always offering help to anyone who needed it. To most people, he was the perfect neighbor, generous, cheerful, and soft-spoken. He often bought biscuits and drinks for the children in the compound, especially the girls. When he returned from work, he would wave at them and call, "My little angels, come and take sweet." The children loved him, or at least that was what everyone thought. For Fiona and her husband Jide, he was more than a neighbor. He was a friend. Sometimes, when Jide was fixing something around the house, Benson would stop by to lend a hand. He often came over with fruits or drinks, always smiling, always kind. But something began to change. One evening, Fiona noticed her daughter, Nana, acting strangely. Normally, when Benson visited, the little girl would run out to greet him happily. But now, she hid behind her mother, clutching tightly to Fiona's wrapper. Benson laughed it off. "Nana, you don't want to greet Uncle Benson again? You've grown shy now?" He reached out to pat her head, but the little girl flinched. Fiona noticed it, a quick, fearful reaction, and something in her stomach twisted. That night, after bathing her daughter and helping her into her nightwear, Fiona asked softly, "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Why didn't you greet Uncle Ben today?" Nana froze. Her small fingers gripped her mother's arm. Her voice came out like a whisper. "Mummy, I don't like Uncle Ben anymore." Fiona's hand stopped midair. "Why? What did he do?" The little girl's lips trembled, tears welled up in her eyes. "He's bad." Fiona frowned slightly, confused. "What do you mean bad, baby?" Nana's eyes darted toward the window, as if she was afraid someone was listening. Then she leaned close and whispered, barely audible, "He touches me and does things to me when no one is around, Mummy." Fiona's entire body went cold. The comb she was holding fell from her hand. What did you say?" she asked, her voice trembling. The little girl started crying, covering her face. "He touches me when you're not around. He said if I tell anyone, he'll kill me." For a moment, Fiona couldn't breathe. Her heart began pounding loudly in her chest. Her hands started shaking. No, it can't be," she muttered under her breath. Not Benson, not the man they had trusted like family. She held her daughter close. Tears filled her eyes. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mummy is here now. He will never touch you again," she whispered in a broken voice. But inside her, something was burning. A fire she couldn't control. That night she couldn't sleep. She paced the room endlessly, her thoughts running wild. Her tears had dried, but her anger had not. She replayed Benson's smile in her head, that same calm, innocent smile, and the words her daughter said kept echoing in her mind. "He touches me when you're not around. He said if I tell anyone, he'll kill me." Fiona clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms. By morning, she had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let it go. She would confront him. She would make him confess. She didn't care how respected he was. She didn't care what anyone said. All she wanted was justice, or at least a chance to look Benson in the eyes and ask why. That night it rained heavily. The sound of thunder echoed across the street. Jide had traveled to a nearby town for a 2-day job, leaving Fiona and Nana alone at home. The rain beat hard against the windows. Fiona was in the kitchen slicing vegetables when she heard a knock at the door. Her heart jumped. "Who's that?" she called, drying her hands with a towel. There was no answer at first, only another knock. Louder this time. She moved to the curtain and lifted it slightly. Through the rain, she saw him. Benson. He stood at the door, drenched, holding an umbrella. A strange chill ran down her spine. For a moment, she thought about pretending not to be home. But then she remembered her daughter's tears. The thought of what that man had done to her made her blood boil. She hesitated, then opened the door slightly. "Uncle Benson, what is it?" Benson smiled, his usual calm smile. "Mummy Nana, good evening. Sorry to disturb you. My rechargeable torch just went off, and I need to check something in my backyard before the rain gets heavier. Can I borrow yours?" She hesitated. "It's late. Can't it wait till morning?" His face was expressionless. "No, it's urgent. I just need it for 2 minutes." Against her better judgment, Fiona stepped aside and handed him the torchlight. He stepped in, shaking off the rain from his coat. The smell of wet mud and something faintly metallic filled the air. As he was about to leave, Fiona's voice stopped him. "Benson, wait." "Yes?" He turned sharply. Fiona's hands were trembling, but her voice carried a quiet anger. "I want to ask you something." He raised a brow. "What is it?" She swallowed hard. "Is it true, what my daughter said?" "Your daughter?" Benson blinked, pretending not to understand. "What did she say?" Fiona's tone sharpened. "She told me you touch her, that you do things you shouldn't be doing with her when no one is around, and you threatened to kill her if she mentioned it to anyone." For a few seconds, there was silence. Then he laughed, a slow, eerie laugh, the kind of laugh Fiona had never heard from him before. It wasn't the usual calm, gentle laugh he always let out. This time, it was deadly. The perfect sound of someone who had been hiding in plain sight for far too long. "You should be careful, Fiona," he said finally, stepping closer. "I don't care what you think you found out or what she told you. But listen, and listen good. If you open that mouth of yours to tell anyone, you'll regret it." Her jaw tightened. "You devil! So this is who you really are? Everyone will hear this, and including my husband." "Shut up," Benson snapped. His smile disappeared. "I see you're stubborn. You want to ruin me, huh? Then both you and your daughter will not live to tell the story. I'll kill you before you try it." He moved toward her. Fiona stepped back instinctively, her heartbeat raced. "Benson, don't come closer," she shouted. But he didn't stop. He grabbed her by the neck, his grip strong and his eyes cold. "I'll end you before you ruin me," he hissed. At that moment, she struggled, gasping for air. Her hand reached behind her and touched the kitchen counter. Her fingers brushed against the knife she had been using earlier. She grabbed it desperately, trying to break free from his suffocating grip, screaming for him to let go of her neck. But he didn't stop. They struggled, with the knife between them now. His weight pressed against her, his hand still on her throat. Then it happened, so fast she couldn't even understand it. The knife turned, pierced into him. A sharp sound escaped his mouth, and suddenly his body went limp. Fiona stumbled backward with the knife in her shaking hand, staring in horror as Benson collapsed, his blood spilling across the floor tiles. She dropped the knife, trembling, her breath coming in short, broken gasps. For a few seconds, the only sound in the room was the rain, pounding, relentless, washing against the walls as though trying to hide the sound of tragedy. Fiona dropped to her knees, pressing her husband's old shirt, the one she had been using to clean the table earlier, against Benson's wound. But it was useless. His body was already still. That same shirt would later become the piece of evidence that traced the investigation back to her husband, leading to his arrest weeks later. "Oh, God!" she cried, her voice trembling. "What have I done?" Tears blurred her vision. She looked around wildly, unsure what to do. She could already imagine what people would say. That she killed an innocent man. In desperation, she dragged his body toward his apartment kitchen while the rain poured, washing the blood away from her floor. She thought no one had seen her. But she was wrong. Her little daughter, Nana, saw everything, but she had been too scared to talk to her mom about it. So for weeks, Fiona had been praying and preparing to say the truth on this very day, not until Nana interrupted her. Gasps filled the courtroom as Nana's small, trembling voice echoed against the walls. Fiona's eyes widened in disbelief, and Nana's tears had already begun to fall. "Uncle Benson was hurting me," Nana said, her voice shaking. "Mummy told him to stop that night, but he wanted to kill her. And she defended herself." She paused, wiped her tears with the back of her hands, and continued. "I knew Mummy would try to take the blame just to save Daddy. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I had to tell the truth about what Uncle Ben was doing to me and the other children. Mummy isn't a bad person. She didn't stab him because she wanted to. It was a mistake. She was only trying to protect me." The room went completely silent. The prosecutor froze mid-sentence. The journalists stopped writing. Even the judge, who had been composed all day, slowly leaned back in his chair, his pen slipping from his hand. The air was thick with shock. Fiona covered her face with both hands, sobbing quietly. She had spent months preparing to confess and save her husband, but now her daughter had said it all. The truth was out. The little girl turned to the judge with tears streaming down her face. "Mummy didn't want to kill him. She was just trying to protect me," she repeated, and broke into deep, heartfelt tears. In that moment, no one could speak. The silence in the courtroom wasn't just silence anymore. It was grief, disbelief, and pain rolled into one. Even the toughest police officer in the room lowered his gaze, because now everyone knew. This wasn't the story of a murderer. It was the story of a mother who broke the law to save her child. For a long, unbearable moment, no one in the courtroom dared to move. The silence stretched so deeply that even the sound of breathing felt too loud. Fiona's lips trembled, her fingers gripping the edge of the witness stand. Her tears fell freely, blurring the faces before her. Now the truth stood naked in front of everyone. The judge looked at her quietly. "Mrs. Fiona," he said softly, "is what the child said true?" The question echoed through the courtroom. Every pair of eyes turned toward her. The lawyers, the journalists, the crowd, even her husband. Fiona opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her chest heaved as if her lungs could no longer hold the weight of what she'd hidden for months. Then suddenly, she broke down, completely. Her cries filled the hall, raw and painful. "Yes, my lord, it's true," she sobbed. "I did it. But I didn't mean to. I was only protecting my daughter." The room fell utterly silent again. Even the clicking pens of reporters stopped. She wiped her tears, trying to steady her voice. "He was going to kill me after what he did to her. I only wanted to stop him." The prosecutor, who had stood confidently moments ago, lowered his eyes slowly. He could not hide the heaviness that washed over him. A woman from the audience whispered in disbelief, "So that was why Uncle Benson was always playing with people's daughters?" Another man shook his head, muttering bitterly, "That man was evil hiding behind a smile." The murmurs grew. Anger, sorrow, regret. Parents looked at each other, shaken, realizing how easily trust can become a weapon. Even the judge's face softened. His once stern expression was replaced by quiet empathy. "Order in court," he said, but his voice was gentler now. He turned to Fiona again. "Why didn't you speak up earlier?" "You could have spared your husband this pain," Fiona wept harder. "I was scared," she said through tears. "Who would have believed me?" He was everyone's favorite neighbor. Everyone loved him. If I had spoken, they would have called me a liar. And my husband would have thought I was making excuses, so I had to wait for this day. She glanced at Jide, the man she loved, the man she'd hurt by staying silent. Jide sat motionless in his chair. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Not from anger, but from heartbreak. From watching his wife carry the burden alone. From realizing how close he had come to losing both her and his freedom. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other. Two souls wounded by silence, bound by love, and finally freed by truth. The judge sat quietly for several minutes after Fiona's confession, reviewing his notes but barely looking at the paper. His thoughts seemed far away. Then he took off his glasses and placed them gently on the table. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of compassion and wisdom. "In the eyes of the law," he began slowly, "it was an act of self-defense. But in the eyes of humanity," he paused, his gaze softening, "it was an act of love." The words hung in the air. He continued, "No one should ever have to choose between justice and survival. What you did was not out of hatred, but out of fear, and the desperate need to protect your child. This court finds you not guilty." The courtroom broke into murmurs, some in relief, others in tears. Fiona fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably, her body trembling with release. Nana ran to her, wrapping her tiny arms around her mother's neck. "Mummy," she whispered, "don't cry again." Fiona held her close, pressing kisses to her hair. "You saved me again, my baby," she whispered softly, her voice shaking. "This time, with the truth." Jide stood slowly, his hands still trembling. He walked over to them, knelt beside his wife, and pulled both of them into his arms. For the first time in months, there were no more lies, no more fear, no more secrets, only tears, forgiveness, and love. The courtroom watched silently as the family held each other, their sobs echoing through the hall, a mixture of pain and peace. When they finally stood to leave, even the judge couldn't hide the emotion in his eyes. He nodded once at Fiona as she passed. She bowed her head slightly, thanking him. As they stepped outside, sunlight cut through the clouds for the first time that day, washing over them like a quiet blessing. Jide held Fiona's hand firmly, with Nana between them. They walked slowly down the courthouse steps, free, broken, but whole again. Lesson from this story. Dear family, sometimes the truth hides behind fear, and sometimes silence punishes the innocent more than guilt ever could. Fiona's silence almost destroyed her family. But her story teaches us that even love can make mistakes. That protecting your child or someone you love, though noble, should never come at the cost of your peace. The truth may be painful, it may tear hearts apart, but when spoken at the right time, it sets everyone free. Because sometimes, the hand that holds the knife isn't driven by hate, but by the desperate need to protect. Did you enjoy this story? Do you think Uncle Benson deserved what befell on him? If you were Fiona, what would you have done that night? Would you have confessed immediately or stayed silent to protect your family? Have you ever known someone who went through a trauma like little Nana did, hurt by someone they trusted or called a friend, family, or even an uncle, yet too afraid to speak up or be believed? Tell me, how did they handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to African Tales by Emade for more fascinating and inspiring stories filled with everyday lessons. See you in the next one.